Let's talk about functional harmony, specifically from the perspective of the 7 diatonic chords in a major and minor scale. We're going to be using C major because it is easy and it requires zero forethought. But in the key of C major or A minor, you're going to have 7 different chords, one for each note in the scale. And we build those chords using things called triads. I'm assuming most people here know what triads are, but just in case you don't, when we're talking about the notes in a scale, we're ignoring these 5 up here, only focusing on this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 goes back to 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. But if you pay attention, 1, 2, 3. Now, if we go from here and we count up 1, 2, 3, those are thirds where you skip one note in between in the scale. It doesn't count, again, the ones that are not in your scale. Stacking 2 thirds on top of each other gets you a triad. And there are 7 triads, like I just mentioned, in C major or A minor. Your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, your 7, and your 1. Now, if I'm in minor, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And notice that it's the exact same chords. The exact same chords. We're going to label them differently based on what our key is, but every scale has 2 main sequences for those chord progressions. Let me open up JS Paint, or excuse me, GIMP, not JS Paint, so that we can sort of draw this out. And I'm going to list each of the notes in C major, and we're going to label them with first their quality, whether they're major or minor, and then we're going to assign Roman numerals to them. We have the 7 letters for our scale. We're going to go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Or not C, because we already have that. These are our 7 letters. Now, C, when we stack thirds, we get a major chord. So this is going to have an uppercase M for major. D, minor. There's a quality difference. This is major. So this is going to have a lowercase m. E, minor, feels the same, lowercase m. F, major E. This is minor. So get the uppercase. That's a shitty M. Much better. All right. G, another major. That gets the uppercase M. A, minor. Lowercase. And then finally B. Oh. This is a very crunchy minor chord. That would be minor. That would be major. Major dropping the third down 1 gets you the minor. dropping the fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down, gets you a special kind of minor called diminished. So I'm going to put the lowercase m here, but we're also going to put the degree sign, a little circle. Like if we're talking about temperature, this little circle right here, this sucker. So now we can start to count up from our root using Roman numbers. So this is 1 down here, 2. I'm going to write these all in Arabic numerals first, just so that we can differentiate. Because this is our code, basically. This is how we determine what we write for the Roman numerals. Now, just like this is a capital M, I'm going to write a capital Roman numeral 1. This is a lowercase m numeral 2. Just follow that. This is kind of like the international declaration or standardization of analyzing chords. We differentiate them between major and minor using case in Roman numerals. And then if there is some sort of special kind of case, like we'll get to for this last one, we'll use modifiers. So lowercase 3 here. Ignore my misshapen eyes. Major 4, so this will be an I, V. There we go. 5, major. Six is minor. And then 7, it is minor, but it has, remember, this little degree sign. So we're just going to copy that degree sign over. V, I, with a little circle. The circle just means you're lowering the top note of that triad one extra note from where it would be for minor. Now, when we refer to these notes, because there is now a lot of overlapping terminology, if I was referring to these in terms of where they are in the scale and not in terms of the actual chords, we would usually use these numbers down here. Technically, we would have a little hat, a little caret over top of them. This little caret right here refers to it being a scale degree. So if you're looking at analysis and you see not a Roman numeral, but an Arabic numeral with a little hat over it like that, that just means this is the first scale degree, the second scale degree, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. Now comes the really annoying, stupid, boring dictionary part. Because if I was trying to refer to this, I could say the 4, but am I talking about the 4th scale degree or the 4 chord? Am I talking about the 3rd? Am I talking about the 3rd scale degree, the 3rd of the chord, or the 3rd chord? Which one do we use? So we started coming up with stupid, annoying, really long and obnoxious names for each one of these scale degrees and chords. And generally, when you're talking about scale degrees, you use these terms rather than the numbers because it allows you to distinguish between them. But you'll also see them used for the chords specifically when we get to this one right here. And so I'll put a little bit of a star here so you know this is when things are going to get extra confusing. So we already know what we call the first scale degree. We use it all the time. I'm going to mark it with an initial of T. T stands for tonic. The tonic is the note that we use to reference our key center. Every other note that we balance is based on the tonic, based on this sequence of scale degrees and chords. Now, above the tonic, we have the second scale degree, or the supertonic. I'm going to mark that with the initial ST. Super being, I think, Latin for above. So the supertonic is above the tonic. Here, the third scale degree, we call it the submediant. I'm going to mark this with S and M. It's called the mediant because it is midway through this sequence of 5 notes between C, D, E, F, G. E is the mediant, the middle note in that count. Before that, or excuse me, after that, sorry, we have what's called the subdominant. I'm going to mark that with S and D. It's called the subdominant because it is the note or chord that comes before the dominant. It is underneath the dominant. Sub is Latin for beneath or below. So going down 1 from G gets us the subdominant. And that's important because at this point, we're actually going to stop counting up from C. And we're actually going to imagine that when we go back from here, that's actually where we're counting from here on out. Imagine in your head a little bit of an imaginary dividing line right here. This dividing line right here is splitting up where we're counting. Now, the fifth scale degree, the reason why it has a star over it is that this is, as this chord implied, the dominant chord. When we get into what OTV was asking about with regards to diatonic chords and functional harmony, this is where that all comes towards. Functional harmony is saying each one of these chords not only has a name, but has a job. It has a direction that it wants to go in. The dominant chord, G major, wants to go back to the tonic, the 1 chord. That feels correct. In our ears, when we hear the dominant chord going to the tonic chord, it feels like we have arrived. We are back at our destination. So it even could feel a little bit cheesy because it is so obvious. But when we're referring to this, we're always going to call it the dominant. The 5 chord is the dominant chord. The 5th scale degree is the dominant scale degree. There is no differentiation. There is some differentiation with this chord, but most of the others are the same. Now, since we're counting down from here, now instead of up, this is going to be called the submediant. The submediant, since it's below the mediant, or it's the mediant below, if I count down, like we counted up, C, D, E, F, G. E is halfway between those two. Now let's count down, not to G, but to F, because we're counting 5. C, B, A, G, F. So halfway between C and F is A. So that makes it the submediant. I know it's a little bit weird. And then this one, the note directly underneath our tonic, the chord built on the note directly underneath our tonic, is called the leading tone, which I will mark off with LT, because it's the tone that leads in. Now, what I want to do is open up another instance of JS Paint, do this same exact process, but we're going to switch the order of the notes. Here, I'm just going to have this. I'm going to maximize this to 72. And this is going to be, instead of C, D, E, F, G, A, B, it's going to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Like we have it in the normal alphabet. Move this down here. So, same exact order for these bottom ones now. Same exact order for these top ones now. Everything else is going to change. But we don't have to go figure out which each one of these are going to be in terms of the capital or lowercase, because we've already done that. We've already set that stuff up. We're just changing these numbers. So at the very bottom, we're going to have 1 with a little caret, 2 with a little caret. I'm just going to do them all on their own. I could have it much better too. 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Whoops, that's a shitty 7. Much better. Give them all their little carets. And then we just have to reference our previous chart. So minor for the first one, lowercase m. The special one, the m with the degree sign, degree sign for the diminished chord, will be a lowercase m with a degree sign. C is major, capital M. D is going to now actually be minor, or it's going to stay minor like we had here. So our 4 is going from major to minor, lowercase. Lowercase here because E is minor. F is major. And G is major. So you could look at it as we're changing all of these to move this 1 back 2. So each one of these shifts by 2 down. That's one of the reasons why I try to say from F up, we're going to start flipping our way around and we're going to be counting down from up, because I want you to get into the habit of not just counting up 2 degrees, but also counting down from degrees. So it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, etc. But also go 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 7. And that will help when it comes to dealing with things like relative, major, and minor. Trying to remember that the relative minor is the 6th scale degree is really hard. Remembering to go from major to minor, you go down 2 notes. To go from minor to major, you go up 2 notes in your scale. That takes way less effort, way less time. If you pick any one of these notes, pick 1 as major, 1 is minor, I can always tell you their relatives. If this is our 1, bam, this is our relative minor. If this is our 1, bam, that's our relative minor. If this is our 1, bam, that's our relative major. Going up 2. It takes 0 thought process, just simple, -2 or +2, based on whether you have this capital M or this lowercase m. So now we can take this and we can start to build the Roman numerals, right? I'm not going to fill in this part. I'm just going to fill in the Roman numbers. This is a lowercase I. This is going to be a lowercase 2i with a little degree sign. 3. Now, this is where some people are going to start to divide on their opinions. I'm not going to do it the way you'll see it most commonly expressed, but I will show you when we're done. Here, I'm just going to mark a capital 3. That's all I'm going to do, is I'm just going to mark a capital 3. Then, I'm going to have a lowercase 4, lowercase 5, a capital 6, and a capital 7. So how do we name these notes? Because now, if I'm talking about the 3, there's a lot of options now. There's a lot of possibilities for what the 3 can be. We've expanded it. We've multiplied everything by 2. So how can we start to differentiate between the major and minor scale degrees? Well, what's important is not what's the same. Most of these are the same. We have the tonic, still. We have the supertonic, still. We have the mediant, still. We have the subdominant, still. We have the dominant, still. We have the submediant, still. But this changes. And this is one of the important distinctions and why I think it is helpful to at least try to understand these names, because it starts to create sort of roadmaps inside of your head so that you don't have to think about these distinctions, even if you're not remembering these names. Knowing that the 7th scale degree in minor is called something different than the 7th scale degree in major, and learning why helps you remember the process later on. I'm going to call this S lowercase b t for the subtonic. Much like we have a subdominant for the note below a dominant, or the chord below a dominant chord, the interval below a dominant chord, or excuse me, the scale degree below a dominant scale degree. We have the note underneath the tonic. Now, why is it different? Why is this a leading tone and this is a subtonic? Well, let's look at the subdominant for a bit of an insight, I'll say. So, the distance between F and G is 2 semitones. We have this note that's not in our scale between them. So when we go down, the subdominant is 1 whole step below the dominant. The leading tone is 1 semitone below our tonic. Our subtonic is 2 semitones below our tonic. Now, I don't know if this is why they called it that. I'm going to speculate that they did not name it because it is 2 semitones. But that's a good way to remember it. The leading tone is going to be 1 semitone below your root. The subtonic, like the subdominant, is 2 notes below, 2 semitones below whatever note you are playing. But the whole point of all of these, now we need to start to think about where these chords are going. The last thing I'm going to do for all of these is I'm going to start to mark them with specific colors. I'm going to mark this with a red X, this with a red X, and this one with a red X. Be the same over here. Whoops. Red X on the 1, on the 3, and on the 6. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to have blue next to the 2, next to the 4, and next to the 6. Same here. Blue next to 2, 4, and 6. Last color, let's do green. Green will go on to 3, 5, and 7. Oops, green on 3, 5, and 7. So what do these colors mean? Red now means our tonic. Anything that is red is considered a tonic chord, which means when you are writing your chord progressions, you can go to the tonic chord from any other chord. You can go from the tonic chord to any other chord. Now, obviously, the tonic qualifies, but for some reason, the mediant and the submediant chords also qualify. Yet they qualify for a second category for some reason, which we'll get into the special cases of those in a second, but just notice how we have this sort of symmetry going on, especially once we start looking at the blue ones. Now, anything that is blue is going to be considered, I'm even going to just focus on this, going to be considered not subdominant, but a new kind that we're going to call predominant. I'm actually going to do this here. I'm going to do a PD here in parentheses, because this is what I meant before. The subdominant is a bit of a special thing only for the chord or the scale degree in the abstract, counting up the scale. This is the subdominant scale degree, but it is the predominant chord. Now, predominant chords contrast with the tonic chords because they can't go everywhere, but they really want to go towards the dominant. Tonic chords typically lead towards the predominant. Predominant chords typically lead towards the tonic, or excuse me, typically lead towards the dominant. And then dominant chords, like this 5 right here, whoops, they want to go back to the tonic chord. That's their preference. Now, as you can see, whoops, we have chords that share. I'm actually going to draw a little tiny dividing line right here. And then I'm going to make all this green to show this is bifurcated. No. Okay, never mind. How do I do this? I guess like this. So, some of these can fit multiple roles. They can wear multiple hats. And this same exact pattern goes over here. Like, I don't want to have to reiterate everything, but Tonic chords include your 1, your 3, and your 6. Predominant chords include your 2, your 4, and your 6. And dominant chords include your 3, your 5, and your 7. The basic framework here, if I make one last instance of JS Paint just to make sure we're not over cluttering this one right here. Basically, it goes the 1 chord wants to go to the 4 chord. And the 4 chord wants to go to the 5 chord. The 5 chord wants to go back to the 1 chord. So we have this wonderful, almost rock, paper, scissors-y back and forth. Just a really nice cycle for our progressions. These other chords serve as substitutions for this basic framework. You can replace this one with a 2. And the circle holds true. You could replace that with a 6 chord. And it would hold true. All of these are acceptable substitutions of that very first 4 chord. Same with the 5 chord right over here. If I go get rid of this sucker right here, we could replace it with the 3, and it would work just fine. We could replace it with the 7, and it would work just fine. In fact, if you combine the 3 and the 7 chord together, you get a much more powerful chord called the dominant 7th. So you have G major, the 5 chord, B D F, the 7 chord, and that just wants to go here. Feels even stronger than that one. So they have like almost like a multiplicative effect. It doesn't quite work for the other chords, but that's the special case of the dominant. That's why it gets that little star right there, because it has a lot of special rules for it. And even with the 1 in some cases. Now, this is a bit more tough, but you can go from like the 1 to the 4 to the 5, and then after the 5, instead of going to the 1, you can go to the 6. This is something called a deceptive cadence. It's not really like we're going back here. It's more like we're going off on a detour. It's more like we're getting rid of this one right here. And instead of going back to the 1, we go off into the distance. And then we go to the 6. And we go from there back somewhere into here or offshoot down here. Because remember, the 6 is also a predominant chord. It substitutes. So these two can actually sort of blend into each other. You could even go right back to the 5 chord and then return home. So you can have this 1, 4, 5, 6, 5, 1. Totally works. There's a lot of directionality there. And that'll be a way of kind of extending these chord progressions beyond this initial framework. Looking at how you can maybe stay in one side. For example, you start on the 1. Instead of going directly to the 4, maybe you take a brief detour. Take a brief detour off, and you stay in the tonic by playing a 3 chord. So we have this. Ooh, whoops, wrong one. And then go to the F. Ooh. Now we have a whole 4 chord progression. Adding that dominant totally works. We could even extend this further by going from the 3, not to the 4, but to a different predominant chord. Let's try going to the 2. And since these are all on the same side, they're all in the same sort of chord placement, it just feels like we're in the same world. So 1, 3, 2, 5, or 4, 5, back to 1. Maybe that doesn't feel the way you like it, so you can go in, do that substitution again. Let's go back up here, and let's go to a 6 chord before we go back to our 1. So let's, actually, we'll do that loop again. So this is the functional roadmap of our chord progression. We could even be a little bit cheeky and say that this 6 is technically kind of a blue because it prepares us to go back into the 5, right? So we're getting a little bit of like circularity, a little bit of kind of like Russian nesting doll stuff going on. So 1, 3, 2, 4, 5, 6, 5, 1. I've written a much bigger chord progression just from utilizing that basic foundation of the tonic chord leads into the predominant chord, the predominant chord leads into the dominant chord, and the dominant chord leads back into the tonic. We're just taking a detour to a substitution for our tonic, a substitution for our predominant, a substitution for our tonic at the end that turns into a predominant before we return back. And, you know, this is definitely advanced stuff. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to say that I expect you to understand all this right here. But if we go back, if we go all the way back, I don't know if my undo history goes that far. Close enough. But if I go ahead and get rid of all of these extra things, we go back and we still just have the same core foundation. Tonic to predominant to dominant, back to tonic. Now, I should say, this was when we were talking about this idea of functional harmony. I haven't gone into sort of the caveats to this. We've touched on some of them with the substitutions and how some chords can serve multiple roles. But there's so many more things you can do, like taking chords from other scales, which is why for now I used this as just a capital Roman numeral 3. If I was going to do this in a way that would make sense for you going forwards, which I said I would do, you will usually see these expressed slightly differently. Instead of just seeing the Roman numeral capital 3, you'll see this as a capital 3 with a lowercase b before the 3, the 6, and the 7. These little lowercase b's, the flat symbol. And that comes down to how you distinguish between major and minor in your scales. What we did today was something called modal relationships. That's our major scale. To get to a minor scale, rather than changing the notes in the scale we started with, we're using the same notes, but we move to a different starting note. But that translates everywhere. You can still have that minor sequence starting on the same note you did for major. Turns into, whoops. That sequence of notes sounds relatively similar to the pitches are different, but the relationships of the notes are the same. So when you are using the modal relationship, you don't really need these because you understand that the major 3 comes from the relative minor scale, so I don't have to think about it. But when we get into things like borrowing chords from other scales, changing or modulating the chords within our scale, you have to start coming up with other ways of describing it. So if I was going to teach you this a different way, I would start with C major and ask what notes we change to get to minor. This third lowers by 1. So we say that the third scale degree is flat. It is lowered by 1. It is flattened. Same with the 6, same with the 7. So if you are online and you're seeing Roman numeral chord analysis, or you're trying to discuss chords and someone gets confused when you just type a capital Roman numeral 3 or 6 or 7, or you see someone use a lowercase b before some other Roman numeral, that's what's going on. You can just say, like if someone's saying, well, why did you not have the flat sign there? It's like, oh, I was thinking about it modally. I was thinking about the relative mode of the major scale rather than the parallel mode between major and minor of the same key center. And that will clear up most things. Moving forwards, probably most times when I'm going to be discussing these, I will be using the modal relationships because that's how I learned. So if you get confused and you see that from me, that's what's going on. I can add these in if people need me to, but I just wanted to top off this subject by kind of clarifying that because I've seen confusion over that and I want to make sure people know where they're going.